welcome to our deep dive. We're tackling a topic that's a bit unsettling, to say the least. Earth's sixth mass extinction.
Definitely unsettling, but also super fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. And to guide us through this, we're using Elizabeth Kolbert's Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Sixth Extinction, An Unnatural History.
Great choice.
It really is.
Yeah.
So get ready for a bit of a crash course on the history of extinctions and why this time things are a bit different.
Yeah, this one's got our fingerprints all over it, unfortunately.
Literally. Okay, so Kolbert, she has this really interesting way of starting the book. It's almost like a mystery novel.
Right. She drops you right into the story of these vanishing frogs in Panama.
Oh yeah, the Panamanian golden frog. They were like practically a national symbol there, weren't they?
Yeah, pretty much. And, I mean, abundant everywhere. And then, poof, gone.
So what happened?
Well, that's the thing, right? It wasn't just like a local thing. It was like this wave, this amphibian die-off spreading across the globe.
Like a pandemic.
Exactly. A pandemic, but for frogs. And the scary part is a lot of these extinctions, they were happening before scientists even knew some of these species existed.
Oh, wow. So it's like a silent extinction is happening.
Pretty much before we even have a chance to discover them.
That's terrifying. But what was causing it? Did they figure that out?
Oh, yeah. The culprit, it turns out, is this deadly fungus, the chytrid fungus. Brud, they call it.
Bruh.
Yeah. And, you might have even seen its effects in your own backyard.
Really?
Declining frog populations, that could be linked to this. This global pandemic, I mean, it's a big deal.
A fungus wiping out frogs globally. That's wild.
It is, but the real head scratcher is how did it even happen? How did this fungus spread so far and wide?
So they don't know.
Well, there are theories. One is it spread through the global trade of African clawed frogs.
African clawed frogs?
Yeah. They used to use them in pregnancy tests back in the day.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And another theory is points the finger at, well, the export of North American bullfrogs.
Bullfrogs. What for food?
Exactly. For frog legs.
Oh, wow.
So either way, the spread of this fungus, it really highlights, how interconnected our world is.
Yeah. It shows how easily we can mess things up, even without meaning to.
For sure.
So we've got this extinction happening right now with the frogs and all. But Kolbert also talks about past extinctions, right? Like way back in time.
Yeah, yeah. She takes us on this whole journey through the history of extinction, from the normal background rate, like the everyday extinctions that just happen naturally, to those big catastrophic mass extinction events, the big ones.
Oh, yeah, like the dinosaurs. Oh. That was a mass extinction, right?
Exactly, like the dinosaurs. That was scientists call it the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction.
Okay.
But there have been others. Think about the Big Five mass extinction events.
The Big Five?
Yeah, like the Permian-Triassic extinction, for example.
Okay.
It's also known as the Great Dying.
The Great Dying. That sounds pretty intense.
It was. Nearly 96% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species just vanished.
96%. That's almost like starting over from scratch.
It is. I mean, the tree of life was pruned drastically.
Jeez. So
yeah.
How did scientists even figure out all this? That there were 5 major extinction events?
Well, it all started with piecing together the fossil record, right? And one guy, Bruce Cuvier, often called the father of paleontology, he played a key role.
Okay.
He examined fossils like the American mastodon bones. They found them at Big Bone Lick, Kentucky.
I've heard of Big Bone Lick.
Yeah.
It's a real place.
Oh, yeah. It's a state park now. Anyway, from studying fossils, Cuvier started to understand that, species could actually disappear forever.
And before that, people didn't think that was possible.
Not really. It was a radical idea back then.
Huh. So Cuvier, he was like a detective solving this ancient mystery.
Exactly. And he wasn't alone. There was Charles Wilson Peel. You remember him from the book?
Oh, yeah. He was the one who sparked that mammoth fever in America.
That's him, by assembling a mastodon skeleton, no less.
That must have been amazing to see.
I know, right? It really captured the public's imagination.
Speaking of sparking imagination, Cuvier, he had some pretty controversial ideas too, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. See, his ideas about these catastrophic events, they kind of clashed with what another scientist, Charles Lyell, was saying.
So what did Lyell think?
Lyell, he was all about gradual change, like slow and steady wins the race.
Huh. So you have these 2 big names in science kind of butting heads over how the world works.
Yeah, pretty much. And in a way, that debate is still going on today.
Wow. So from frogs to fossils, we're starting to see how extinctions are like woven into Earth's history.
It's a long and complicated story.
Yeah. But then Kolbert brings in this story of the great auk.
What's so important about this bird?
The great auk. Well, it's a stark example of human-driven extinction.
They were flightless, you see. And once, I mean, they were so abundant that settlers in Iceland would, just eat them for dinner. Can you imagine?
Really? Just like casual great auk for dinner.
That's how it was. But then, over time, all the hunting for their feathers and eggs, it drove them to extinction.
Wait, so humans actually hunted a species to extinction, like completely wiped them out?
It happens. And the great auk's last stand, it was on this island, LD Iceland. Sad story, really.
That's pretty unsettling to think that we can have that kind of impact.
Yeah. But, I mean, the great auk, it's this one example, right? The scale of what happened to the dinosaurs, that's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of dinosaurs, what did wipe them out? I know there are lots of theories.
Well, the prevailing theory, it's called the Alvarez Hypothesis.
Okay.
And it's a great example of, scientific detective work.
So what did they find?
Well, scientists, they found this layer of iridium.
Iridium?
Yeah. It's a rare metal, not very common on Earth, but common in asteroids.
Asteroids.
And they found this layer of iridium at a site in Gubbio, Italy.
Oh, boy.
Yep. And that's what led them to the asteroid impact theory.
Hold on. So you're saying that one giant rock from space wiped out all the dinosaurs?
It wasn't just the dinosaurs. The impact, it was so massive, it reshaped entire ocean ecosystems.
Wow.
Like, just imagine the scale of an event that could wipe out entire groups of species, like, the ammonites.
Ammonites.
Yeah, these extinct marine creatures. They looked kind of like giant snails.
Oh, okay. So this asteroid, it was like a reset button for the planet.
In a way, yeah. It wiped the slate clean for mammals, eventually.
For us. And for us, ultimately.
That's pretty mind-blowing. It makes you wonder what other secrets are buried out there, waiting to be discovered.
Oh, there are plenty.
And speaking of discoveries, Kolbert also talks about this new concept, the Anthropocene. What is that exactly? It's a big idea. It's the idea that humans, we've become this geological force. Like, we're powerful enough to actually mark a new epoch in Earth's history.
The Anthropocene, a new epoch. I mean, that's huge.
It is huge. It's basically saying that, we're leaving a permanent mark on the planet.
On a geological scale.
On a geological scale. It's written in the rocks, so to speak.
Wow. But I remember reading that there's some debate about this Anthropocene idea, right?
Yeah, there's definitely debate about when it actually started. Like, what's the official start date? And, what it means for us, for our responsibility to the planet.
That's a heavy question.
It is.
So we've got these past extinctions, the big five and all that. But the Anthropocene, that implies that we're like smack dab in the middle of a new one, right? The sixth, the mass extinction.
That's right.
And Kolbert uses this really specific example to show what's happening. It's about the ocean, right?
Yeah, she takes us to Castello Aragonese. It's in Italy.
Okay.
And the waters around it, they're naturally acidified.
Naturally acidified.
Yeah, it's because of volcanic vents and stuff, but it gives us this glimpse into the future of our oceans because, rising CO2 levels, they're causing the ocean to become more acidic overall.
Okay, wait. So the ocean is becoming more acidic. What does that even mean for marine life?
Well, imagine a world where, calcifying organisms, they struggle to survive.
Calcifying organisms.
Like barnacles, mussels, corals, they all need calcium carbonate to build their shells and skeletons. But when the ocean gets more acidic, that calcium carbonate, it just dissolves.
Oh, I see. So they can't build their shells.
Exactly. It's a big problem.
And corals, they're like the foundation of entire ecosystems, aren't they?
Exactly. So ocean acidification, it's a major threat to ocean biodiversity. It throws the whole balance off.
That's a pretty bleak picture. And it doesn't stop there, right? Kolbert takes us to the Amazon rainforest, too.
Yeah, the Amazon, it's one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. But deforestation and climate change, they're putting immense pressure on it.
It's a 1-2 punch.
Exactly. Kolbert highlights the work of this scientist, Miles Silman. He studies tree migration in the Andes.
Tree migration? Trees can migrate?
Well, not like birds do. It's more like their seeds spread and new trees grow in areas that are more suitable, as the climate changes.
Okay, I see. So it's like a slow motion migration.
Right. But what Silman's found is that, even with all of nature's incredible adaptability, these trees, they're having trouble keeping up with the rapid temperature increases.
So even the trees are struggling to adapt.
Yeah, It's a big problem for the entire rainforest. And then you add in habitat fragmentation.
Habitat fragmentation.
That's when, you chop up the rainforest into smaller and smaller pieces.
Oh, I see. Like with roads and development and stuff.
Exactly. And that has huge consequences for species loss.
So are we losing species in the Amazon?
We are. And we're still discovering new ones, too.
That's kind of crazy, isn't it? Discovering new species while others are disappearing.
Yeah, it is. It's like a race against time.
So what are we doing to protect the Amazon?
There are a lot of efforts underway, conservation groups, sustainable forestry practices, things like that.
That's good.
Yeah, but it's a complex issue. There are a lot of competing interests.
I bet. All this talk about the Amazon, it reminds me of invasive species.
Invasive species?
Yeah, like when species get introduced to new environments and then they just, take over.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a huge problem, too.
It's like they don't have any natural predators or anything, so they just go wild.
Exactly. It's called enemy release.
Enemy release.
Yeah, it's when a species escapes its natural enemies.
That makes sense. I never thought about it like that.
And, we've already talked about one example, right?
Oh, yeah. The chytrid fungus. That's an invasive species, right?
Exactly. It got introduced to new environments and, well, you know the rest of the story.
Wiped out the frogs.
It's a classic example of how an introduced species can just, wreak havoc on an ecosystem.
So it's not just about, protecting pristine wilderness areas. It's also about managing what's already here.
Exactly.
That's a lot to think about.
It is, but it's important.
We've been talking about extinctions across these vast periods, but Kolbert also dives into a specific period, the Pleistocene epoch.
The Pleistocene.
Yeah. And the extinction of megafauna.
Oh, right. The mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, all those amazing creatures.
And what happened to them? Why did they disappear?
That's a great question, and there's actually a lot of debate about it.
Really?
Yeah. The big question is, was it climate change or was it human hunting that drove them to extinction?
So either the climate shifted too drastically or humans hunted them to extinction.
It's probably more complex than that, to be honest.
Okay.
Kolbert presents both sides of the argument, lays out the evidence for each.
And what does the evidence say?
Well, one theory, it's called the overkill hypothesis. Yeah. It suggests that, even small-scale hunting by humans, it could have had a huge impact on these animals.
Okay, but why?
Because, these megafaunas, they were slow reproducing.
Ah, I see. So if you're constantly taking out individuals, the population can't bounce back fast enough.
Exactly. It's like a slow-motion domino effect.
Okay, so that's the overkill hypothesis. Is there any evidence to support that?
Oh, yeah. There's actually quite a bit. For instance, the timing of many megafauna extinctions, it coincides with the arrival of humans in new areas.
Oh, interesting. So right when humans show up, the megafauna start to disappear.
That's the pattern. And scientists have even used, get this, fossilized poop.
Fossilized poop.
Yep. Specifically, Spormiella fungal spores.
Okay.
They're found in megafauna dung.
So they're using fossilized poop to track the decline of these giant animals.
Exactly. It's amazing what we can learn from the past, even from poop.
That's wild.
But, like I said, it's not as simple as humans being the sole cause of these extinctions. Climate change likely played a role, too.
Right. So it was probably a combination of factors.
Exactly. Multiple pressures converging at a critical point in Earth's history.
It makes you wonder if we're at a similar turning point now. I mean, with climate change and all the other pressures we're putting on the planet.
Yeah. It's a good question to ask. And it leads us to another fascinating extinction story.
Okay. Tell me more.
This time, it's about our closest extinct relatives.
The Neanderthals.
Neanderthals. Now, that's a story I want to hear. Neanderthals. It's funny how we use that word Neanderthal like it's an insult. Like someone's stupid or something.
Right. It's like the ultimate diss. But it's interesting how our view of Neanderthals has changed over time.
So they weren't just these, knuckle-dragging cavemen.
Not even close. Kolbert really digs into this in the book. She talks about this guy, Svante Pääbo. He's a pioneer in paleogenetics.
Okay.
And get this, he actually managed to sequence the Neanderthal genome. Whoa, wait. He sequenced, the entire genetic code of a Neanderthal.
Yep, from, ancient bones and stuff.
That's incredible. So what did we learn from that? Did it change our understanding of Neanderthals?
Oh, yeah, big time. For a long time, Neanderthals were depicted as these brutish, primitive creatures. But recent research, including Pääbo's work, it paints a very different picture.
Okay, so what's the new picture?
Well, for starters, We now know they were intelligent, like really intelligent. They were capable of making sophisticated tools, and they even had their own forms of art and culture.
So not so different from us, really.
Right. And maybe the most shocking revelation from Peibo's work was the discovery of Neanderthal DNA in modern human populations.
Wait, you're telling me I might have a little Neanderthal in me?
If you're of European or Asian descent, there's a good chance you do.
That's wild. So how is that even possible? Did we, live alongside them or something?
It's more complicated than that. The leaky replacement hypothesis, that's what scientists call it, it suggests that, before modern humans fully replaced Neanderthals, there was some interbreeding going on.
You mean like our ancestors hooked up with Neanderthals?
That's what the DNA suggests. Imagine that, right? Our ancestors sharing the planet with another human species.
That's mind-blowing. It completely changes my perspective on human history.
It really does. It shows how intertwined our evolutionary journey has been.
So we've got these multiple human groups interbreeding, leaving their genetic mark. It's fascinating. But it also brings us back to the theme of this deep dive, right? Extinction.
Right.
If we're in the middle of this sixth mass extinction, what can we do to prevent further loss? I mean, how do we stop it?
That's the million-dollar question. Knowing what we know now about past extinctions and the pressures on biodiversity, how do we protect what's left?
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. Where do we even begin?
Well, Kolbert explores both the successes and challenges of conservation efforts. And she emphasizes that, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. It's got to be a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, so give me an example of a success story.
Well, the California condor, for example. They were on the brink of extinction.
Oh, yeah, I remember hearing about them. Weren't they down to like a handful of birds?
Yeah, something like that. But through these intensive captive breeding programs, they've managed to bring them back.
That's amazing. It shows that, it's not always hopeless.
Right. But it also highlights the challenges, too. I mean, bringing a species back from the brink like that, it's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, I bet. And it makes you wonder, are these isolated successes? Can we really replicate this on a larger scale?
That's the question, isn't it? And then you have the more complex cases, like the Hawaiian crow, the ala they call it.
Okay.
It's extinct in the wild. The only ones left are in captive breeding facilities.
Wow. So they only exist because we're keeping them alive.
Yeah. And that raises a whole other set of questions, right?
Yeah. Like, if a species can only survive in captivity, is it really saved?
Exactly. What does that mean for the future of biodiversity? And what about the species that require these vast, intact habitats to survive?
It's a lot to ponder. It's like we're trying to put the pieces of a broken puzzle back together. But in all this complexity, Kolbert keeps bringing us back to this one central theme, right?
Interconnectedness,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
From the vanishing frogs to the demise of the dinosaurs, from the great auk to the Hawaiian crow, Kolbert emphasizes this idea that all life on Earth, it's deeply intertwined.
It's like a domino effect. You knock one piece over and it triggers a cascade of consequences.
Right. And what's happening now with this sixth mass extinction, it's directly tied to our actions.
So what does it all mean? If we're the ones driving this, what's our responsibility?
That's the big question. Kolbert's book doesn't offer any easy answers, but she does give us a powerful framework for thinking about the problem. She introduces this concept of the new Pangea.
The new Pangea. Okay, remind me, Pangea, that was that supercontinent, right?
Right.
Millions of years ago, before the continents drifted apart.
Right. But Kolbert's using new Pangea as a metaphor.
A metaphor for what?
For the increasing interconnectedness of the world, through human activities, global travel, trade, all that stuff.
Okay.
We're moving species around the globe at an unprecedented rate, intentionally and unintentionally.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we're creating this new supercontinent, not of land masses, but of ecosystems.
So we're breaking down those natural barriers that used to keep things separate.
Exactly. We're shuffling the deck of life on Earth and creating all sorts of unintended consequences.
And that leads to problems like invasive species, right?
Exactly. Invasive species disrupt ecosystems. Native species get pushed to the brink, and we see this trend towards homogenization.
Homogenization, what does that mean?
It means everything starts to look the same. You lose that unique character of different ecosystems, the incredible diversity of life that evolved over millions of years. It starts to disappear.
That's kind of sad. I mean, I love traveling and seeing all the different plants and animals in different parts of the world.
I know, right? And it's not just about the aesthetics. That loss of diversity, it actually weakens the resilience of ecosystems.
Resilience, like their ability to bounce back from disturbances.
Exactly. Think about it. When you have a variety of species, some are better adapted to handle drought, others can withstand floods, some are resistant to certain pests or diseases.
So biodiversity is like a safety net for nature.
Exactly. It's like having a basketball team with 5 players who can only shoot 3-pointers.
Okay.
They might be great at that one thing, but what happens when they need to play defense or drive to the basket?
They're going to get crushed.
Exactly.
So homogenization, it's like making nature's basketball team less versatile, less able to handle whatever gets thrown at it.
Right. And that impacts those essential services that we depend on. Clean air, clean water, pollination, climate regulation.
The things we take for granted. This is starting to sound a bit doom and gloom. I know Kolbert's book is a call to action, but where do we go from here? What can we do to change course?
Well, recognizing the problem, that's the first step. Kolbert's book helps us do that. It helps us understand the scale of the challenge.
Okay, awareness is key. But then what? What can we actually do?
Well, we can start by reducing our own impact. Making conscious choices about what we consume, how we travel, how we manage our resources.
So individual actions do matter.
They do. And we can also support organizations that are working to protect biodiversity.
Okay.
And advocate for policies that address the root causes of the problem, things like climate change, habitat loss, the spread of invasive species.
So it's a combination of personal responsibility and collective action.
Exactly. And never underestimate the power of education. We can talk about this stuff, share what we've learned, and encourage others to take action.
Knowledge is power. The more we understand about this, the better.
I agree.
Yeah. Knowledge is power. We need more of that for sure. And, thinking about the future, if we accept that this 6th mass extinction is happening, what are the long-term implications? What kind of world are we creating?
Well, that's where that concept of the new Pangea comes in, and that trend toward homogenization. We're not just losing individual species, right? We're losing the uniqueness of different ecosystems. Imagine a world where every place you go, it all kind of looks and feels the same species dominating everywhere.
But losing those unique flavors, I'd love to travel and experiencing different cultures and different ecosystems. It would be a shame to lose that.
Absolutely. And it's not just about aesthetics. That loss of diversity weakens ecosystems, makes them less resilient.
Okay, so explain that. Why does diversity equal resilience?
Well, think about it. When you have a lot of different species, some are better at handling drought, others can withstand floods, some are resistant to pests or diseases. So you've got this built-in backup system.
Ah, I see. Biodiversity acts as a buffer, helping ecosystems adapt and survive when things change.
Exactly. But with homogenization, we're losing those natural defenses.
It's like having a basketball team, and every player can only shoot 3-pointers.
That's a great analogy.
They might be amazing at shooting threes, but what happens when they need to play defense or drive to the basket? They're going to get crushed.
Exactly. So homogenization, it's like we're making nature's basketball team less versatile, less able to handle whatever gets thrown at it.
Right. And then that impacts those essential services that we depend on too, right? The clean air, clean water, pollination, climate regulation, all that stuff.
All of it. The things we take for granted.
Exactly. This is starting to sound pretty doom and gloom, I got to say. I know Kolbert's book is a call to action, but where do we go from here? What can we do to change course? It feels kind of overwhelming.
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to acknowledge the problem. Really understand it. And I think Kolbert's book helps us do that.
Okay, awareness is key. But then what?
Well, we can start by reducing our own impact, right? Make conscious choices about what we consume, how we travel, how we manage our resources.
So individual actions do matter.
They do. Every little bit helps. And we can support organizations that are working to protect biodiversity, too. There are a lot of people out there fighting the good fight.
Okay, so there's hope.
There's always hope. But we have to be active. We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix it.
Right. We have to be part of the solution. And what about policy changes?
Oh, absolutely. We need systemic change. We need policies that address the root causes of the problem. Climate change, habitat loss, the spread of invasive species, all of it.
So it's a combination of things. Individual actions, supporting the right organizations,
No.
pushing for policy changes.
And education. Never underestimate the power of education. We can talk about these issues, share what we've learned, encourage others to get involved.
That's what we're trying to do here.
Exactly.
Well, this has been quite a journey, a deep dive into the 6th extinction, and it's been sobering, definitely. but also thought-provoking.
I agree.
It's a reminder that we're not just passengers on this planet. We have a responsibility to act, to be stewards of life, and to use our knowledge and our ingenuity to create a better future.
Well said.
So to all of you listening out there, I highly recommend checking out Kolbert's book, The Sixth Extinction. It's a challenging read, but it's ultimately hopeful. It will make you think differently about the world and about your place in it.
It's a must-read for anyone who cares about the future of our planet.
That's for sure. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep learning.